Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the March 26, 2026 Agenda Meeting of the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. I'm Katie Sieben, the Chair of the Commission. We have two other commissioners present for today's hearing. I'll take the roll. Commissioner Sullivan?
Here.
Commissioner Tuma?
Here.
A quorum is present. And we have two items on our agenda today. And before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that it is Women's History Month, as most people likely know, and the Commission thanks women in the industry, on our staff, in other state agencies, including at the Capitol, for the significant contributions they have made to helping us make our state and our country better. So we appreciate and acknowledge the women who have come before us and the shoulders that we collectively stand on.
Well, and just a little bit of history along that lines. I was just reading in the newspaper that now finally the Senate has allowed people to bring their children to the Capitol and also to the retiring room, and I think you were one of the first ones that started to push back against that. So I guess you were making history 2 decades ago. So
I don't think I made history, but in that regard, but
we were all talking about it.
I was certainly on the struggle bus of trying to have children while being a senator, and so I really appreciate the leadership of the current women senators to change that rule to make it a little easier for moms to serve in elected office. So, yes, thank you. So our first agenda item today will be introduced by Mr. Stolpis. When you're ready, please go ahead.
Chair. Item number 1 is docket number E002/RP-24-67 in the matter of Northern States Power Company doing business as Xcel Energy. Petition for approval of generator projects for MISO Eris. 3 issues before the Commission. Should the Commission approve the power purchase agreements included within Xcel's petition? Should the Commission authorize the company to recover through the fuel clause rider the Minnesota jurisdictional portion of the costs incurred under the PPAs from Minnesota retail customers? And should the Commission require Xcel to apply in future resource acquisition filings an imputed debt cost estimate to PPA projects? That's all I have, and I'll be available for questions.
Thank you. If the parties could please come forward. Mr. Conlon, we'll start with appearances, please. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Riley Conlon on behalf of Xcel Energy. With us online is Mr. John Bornhofen, and in the room I have Mr. Chris Shaw, Dr. Bishwan's son, as well.
Thank you. Dr. Racco.
Good morning, Steve Racco from the department.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Peter Tegland with the department.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Peter Schultz with the Office of the Attorney General, Residential Utilities Division.
Okay, thank you. We'll begin with Commissioner questions. Commissioner Tuma?
Yeah, I have questions. That's okay. To the department, Cannon Falls kind of happening fast, okay? Things changing, and so I've had a chance to read trade secret stuff, so we can't get into a lot of things, but I'm trying to make sure that you are comfortable with everything that's happening so far. I think there's a path forward without necessarily approving it today, or at least creating some sort of opportunity for you to take a more deeper dive into the Cannon Falls changes, maybe do a negative check off or something like that, but I'm trying to think of your timing, your comfort level with where we're at right now, because the way the decision option reads is approve the expansion. I would assume that is expansion as recently proposed. I think we're going to have to maybe change the language because it's a little different than what was given to us in the application. And so I'm trying to struggle with timing, comfort level with this. I had a chance to read it. There's a lot of stuff there. Obviously, we rely on you. I understand you've had some communication, so give us your comfort level with where you're at, what your recommendation is, and whether you feel you need maybe a little more time for a deeper dive, and if we should think about maybe a different way of handling that particular project.
Dr. Rackow.
Commissioners, we don't really see a need for additional time and analysis. The main change is the price, and it was advertised in the contract that there was the potential for the price to go up. They had some limits in the contract. So we're aware of that, and it happened. And if you look at the price, it still would have been selected, if that would have been increased way back at the beginning. It still would have been selected in the bidding process, where this actually wasn't in, but it is comparable to. So the price has gone up, but it isn't to the point where anybody would be worried about it.
Yeah, and I think, and probably would have been much more concerned about this 10 years ago when we didn't have a lot of load growth coming to us and a lot of capacity needs. So this is in a different place than, say, 10 years ago at this stage.
Yes, that's the other issue is, in addition to the projects here, Xcel's model is selecting a gigawatt of capacity resources by 2031. So it's not like we're jumping into something we don't have a big need for.
To Mr. Schultz, OAG, I just want to make sure there's a comfort level going forward. Like I said, I've read all the trade secret. I feel relatively comfortable, like I said, because of the conditions we're in, but I don't want to rush into a decision that is, things are changing. So I just want to get your comfort level on Cannon Falls and whether you have any concerns or want any more time.
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Schultz.
Commissioner Tuma, so we didn't analyze the Cannon Falls project or the battery storage projects in depth. We like you, rely on the department for their expertise in energy markets and modeling, things like that. So if the department's comfortable with it, I think we don't have a position for or against it. Nothing is raising our eyebrows at this point.
That's all the questions I have, Madam Chair.
Mr. Schultz, just following up then, I assume you're comfortable with the staff revision of decision option 4, which is the language we adopted in a previous docket regarding the new trade measure event?
That's right. Yes, Madam Chair, we are comfortable with that. That was what you ordered last time.
And Dr. Rackow, for the department, are you comfortable with the decision option 4?
Chair's been working, we're working with changes to decision option.
And Mr. Conlon?
Madam Chair, yes.
Okay. And regarding decision option 6 to Mr. Schultz, I don't know if we necessarily need to do that. It's a little odd to, I guess I want to hear like how tied you are to decision option 6. And it's a little, the language is just a little bit off in my mind. Like we don't have to do that to clarify our approval of a PPA, but what are your additional thoughts about how strongly you feel about decision option 6?
Madam Chair, we're not going to die on having decision option 6. I think it's a helpful clarification, but I don't think it's necessary as long as the order doesn't imply that there's any, pre-approval of changes to the capital structure.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah, I think, Madam Chair,
Commissioner Tuma.
that was the same with too, is, how are these going to be divided up in rate recovery between jurisdictions? I think that's all issues that I understand are left for future decisions, Mr. Conlon. I mean, that's not being decided here. I mean, obviously, we are concerned about North Dakota, South Dakota. We've had a lot of discussion with Otter Tail, but some of these, we don't know what our friends in North Dakota and South Dakota are going to do. And I think those decisions are reserved for something later, just like this would be reserved for later.
Mr. Conlon.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Tuma, subject to someone coming up here and correcting me, I believe that's correct. The issue for recovery was the Minnesota jurisdictional part of this through the fuel clause, and that's what's here
And if we have a dispute with what that jurisdictional thing is, right now, we're sharing these with our neighbors. I don't know what they think about batteries. I think they would be okay with a gas plant, but we just don't know at this stage. And so I wanna make sure that we're reserving that argument. I have no belief that they should have problems with batteries, but they've had problems with other really good projects in the past too. So I just wanna make sure it's clear those are future decisions, how we play that out. Would be some risk for the company shareholders on that.
Mr. Conlon.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Tooma understood.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Sullivan, did you want to make a motion?
I'd be happy to make a motion. I would move decision option 1 to approve the PPAs. I would move decision option 3 and 4, and that'd be it.
And 5?
Oh, yes, and decision option 5.
Is there any discussion, Commissioner
I don't know
Tooma?
if there really is a need to change A. I mean, I just want to make, because a lot of things changed.
1A?
Yeah, to say as amended or as modified. I don't know if that would be needed. I'm kind of looking at the order writer that this is the new language. As long as he's comfortable with it, I'm comfortable.
That's implied in your motion, Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Great. On Commissioner Sullivan's motion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion prevails. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for the assist there with 5. I just kind of liked it. You will enjoy them. They're the
want to
cause of probably 5 pounds of weight gain on my part.
Mr. Eck, welcome. When you're ready, please introduce our second agenda item.
Good morning, Chair Sieben, Commissioners. Item number 2 is docket CN-25-117 in the matter of the application for a certificate of need for the PowerOn Midwest 765 kV and 345 kV high voltage transmission line project. The questions before the Commission are, should the Commission accept the certificate of need application as substantially complete? Should the Commission authorize review of the certificate of need application using the informal process, or refer the matter to the Court of Administrative Hearings for contested case proceedings? And should the Commission consider any additional procedural items? And just point out, Commissioner Tooma filed additional decision options yesterday, which were filed to e-dockets and which were also distributed to all the commissioners. And with
Do you
this-
have copies in here? Mr. Eck, I didn't ask you ahead of time, but we don't. I can find, we'll have it online. It's okay. Okay, sorry, keep going.
No, we can get somebody to make copies if.
We might need that.
Other than that, I think there's also, several of the commenters are here, and you have a table of those folks that are made available.
Sorry, what was that last part? Other people are online?
Several of the commenters listed that sent out notice of this meeting.
Right, are online. So, great, thank you. Would the parties please come forward, and we'll begin with appearances. And if you're appearing online, if you could turn on your camera so that I know that you're there. We'll begin on my far right. Mr. Crawford, good morning.
Good Morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Brandon Crawford with the Citizens Utility Board of Minnesota.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Valerie Herring, appearing on behalf of ITC Midwest.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Lisa Agramonte on behalf of Great River Energy and Xcel Energy, and I'm with the law firm of Frederickson and Byron.
And good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Carol Overland representing North Route Group and No 765 MN.
Good morning, Chair Commissioners. Jamie McAllister with the Minnesota Department of Commerce, and with me today is Forrest Idbo.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. This is Forrest Idbo, also with the department.
And Mr. Ellis, I see you turned your camera on. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Matt Ellis, Great River Energy.
Is anyone here showing up on behalf of MISO? Curious? No. And then Ms. Wheeler, welcome.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. This is Elizabeth Wheeler on behalf of Clean Grid Alliance.
Okay, thank you. We'll begin with Commissioner questions. Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair Stephen. This is a question for Ms. Agramonte or Ms. Herring, or the applicants. In reviewing the document and the record, it's just a little weird how it's coming to us. I'm wondering if you can help explain, like, why, we're not going to get a route for another year. We've got the certificate of need coming in, and the certificate, this is fundamentally just about completeness review, but like, what are you thinking about in terms of, like, why are we doing the CN now? We don't have the route. I understand there are separate questions, and, I fundamentally get that point, but I'm just kind of wondering from the perspective of the public, the public is not going to really understand, like, oh, we're not talking about the route now, we're talking about need, or now we're talking about need and not now we're talking about the route and not need. It's just kind of quirky.
Thank you, Chair Stephen and Commissioner Sullivan. The right of first refusal statute was amended to require an application for a certificate of need within 12 months of MISO's approval. That's why you're getting the certificate of need. It takes a long time to route a transmission line. I know that Commissioner Tuma has suggested that there might be some computer program that the applicants are using, but they're not. They're meeting with landowners. They're going out and looking at routes. I can tell you that two people in the room here today who have spent the last 3 days traversing 600 miles of potential route options to try to develop an appropriate route. It takes time and it takes public involvement. So that's why the route permit will be later than the certificate of need.
Sorry to interject, Commissioner Sullivan. Ms. Agramonte, can you just, and I saw in the application and the record, this is the CN for the entirety of the Minnesota portion of the project, but then I believe the applicant said there may be like 4 different route permits. Is that correct?
Chair Stephen, thank you for that question. The 3 owners of these various segments are here today as the joint applicants in the certificate of need. In each of those segments, there's different ownership interests, and so there's 2 here, 2 there, 1 there, and they're all going to be separated so that, again, we can focus on a specific geographic area for the routing with the public and reflecting the individual ownership interests. If these were all combined, and I know staff did explore that with us, and we did talk about it, we just think that would be unwieldy as well, trying to staff meetings across the entire state for a combined process, and it would also mean that we have to wait until the very last route segment is done to start the process for these approvals. And so we think the most efficient way and consistent with what the legislature said was go in, get your certificate of need in a timely fashion, and then do your routing.
Thanks. Yeah, I fully recognize that this is, as a 765 line, we haven't done one of these. This will be the largest, power line in the state, if not the Midwest. It's part of a system that MISO has approved, but I mean, it's a huge line. It'll be very much the first time issue of first impression for us. But you have indicated that you would be comfortable with it going through the alternative process. I'm just kind of, my feeling is that, you know, a smoother route would be to go through contested case, you know, and that there's going to be a number of issues. The public is going to have to, you know, be pretty deep, is going to be deeply involved in this. I'm just kind of curious if you could, you know, give me a little bit more color around your position, why you would prefer to go the lighter touch route, considering this is a big, big issue.
Yeah, Commissioner Sieben, Chair Sieben, Commissioner Sullivan, I didn't have a chance to provide opening remarks, but the applicants have no objection to a contested case. I think part of our concern was whether we had any parties who might want to participate in a contested case. But seeing that Ms. Overland has indicated she does want to come, and also looking at the efficiency of ensuring that we have a predictable process. And as you noted, a contested case would be a predictable process with an ALJ overseeing, you know, the procedural schedule as well as issues of discovery and the scope of the proceeding. And I'll just take this opportunity to say that while the voltage is different, the structure heights aren't going to be that much different from what we've seen. The structure that's proposed is different than what we've seen recently. The issues of magnetic fields are still related to the current. It's not because it's a separate voltage.
I think
there's a lot of similarities.
I hear that. My understanding of the way the technology is that with 345s and lower voltages, we have the opportunity to kind of dial it in and to deal with, like, okay, well, we're gonna move over here, we're gonna move over there. This is gonna be straighter. That this is more, if kind of you build you're putting 765 down a corridor and you are sticking to that corridor, and that will have an impact, a landowner impact that may not be as mitigatable as like with a 345 or 270 or something like that. So it will be different.
May I address?
Ms. Agramonte.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Sullivan, yeah, routing is different because of the cost of those angle structures and the ability to kind of maneuver, as you said, with lower voltages. You can kind of jump across streets. But then I'm going to go back to that 600 miles that Mr. Lesher and Mr. Rothberg just did. That's what they're trying to do, is identify those areas where they can make those crossovers to avoid as many impacts to residents as they can.
Right.
And to Commissioner Tuma's indication in multiple dockets, they're looking at earlier acquisition and then later acquisition to see if that can help facilitate reduced costs while giving landowners an early option. That's still being explored right now. So they're trying to use all the tools they can to present to you a route that is the best route that they can, given those constraints.
And since this is the last time I'm going to see you probably until you bring us the route, I will just, and I'm sure all your people know this, but I'm going to make a strong pitch that I really hope that the state of Minnesota has new legislation that preferences that these go into interstate highway corridors. You're in southern Minnesota. My hope is that you can find as much of I-90 down there as possible to route this into. I think that our experience, both with the CapEx lines and double circuiting MVP lines, is that when you can reuse existing corridors, that makes the process go much smoother. And quite frankly, the public, it's very odd to them, to most people, like, why don't you use the corridor that the highway's in? You know, why are you a quarter of a mile south or a quarter mile north of the highway? So I recognize there are physical realities, there's engineering realities, but I just do think it's important that, you know, you strongly consider those corridors where that's a possibility. And I know, you know, this is going to be going through some of the, you know, the most pristine areas of the state and the driftless, and it's, you know, coming from Wisconsin in the driftless. This is not only is it pristine and an important area, you know, ecologically, but it's also it's going to be really hard to, as we've seen with other transmission projects. So I hope that you guys are, and I know you're all this is in your brains and you're thinking about it, but I'm just going to re-up it as it's something, since we're going to have to go through this public process. And I really hope that you guys are like, yeah, let's, if you've crossed it off your list, I hope you put it right back on because I think it's going to be important. I do have another question before I get off my high horse. And this is actually, Commissioner Tuma, I was looking at your decision options and I was kind of, this is more, and maybe I can hand it over to you, but there's a lot to digest. So, and I just kind of wondering if you could kind of help me through it.
Before we go to Commissioner Tuma, can I stay on the distinction between either a contested case or a notice and comment, if that's okay? Ms. Herring, can you give us your overall explanation? It's like, obviously like a huge project overall, the siting of it, the different components of the route, and that there is a lot of support for doing a notice and comment from, I was pretty surprised, Ms. McAllister, and I'll ask you next, like for a notice and comment process to something that, you know, has the potential to be really controversial. But I also think about it in terms of it's controversial not because we have to do it, but because the location of it is what's going to be controversial. So can you give the commission like your take on why you think pushing for a notice and comment rather than a full contested case is in the public's interest?
Thanks, Chair Sieben. So I think both processes, both the informal process and the contested case process, provide a substantial record for the commission to make its decision on a certificate of need. The contested case process does provide, you know, obviously the opportunity for testimony from the applicants and other parties. It also provides discovery, which, you know, can also help develop the record. So in some, you know, the contested case process does tend to have more paper and, you know, potentially more evidence in that case. So from the public's perspective, you know, there'll be different rounds of testimony that they're able to review, witnesses that will provide testimony. So, you know, it does provide a little bit of a more fulsome record. But both processes provide a complete record for the commission to make its decision.
And on a contested case, like given the complexity of the overall, just the CN, the docket before us today, would the commission, under our existing rules, still be able to make a decision on the CN in time to not hold up any portion of eventual construction or, you know, like energization of the line, which is ultimately what we're working towards here?
Chair Sieben, we can work with obviously we haven't had a chance to meet with parties to discuss the schedule for a potential contested case, but that'll be part of our discussions to make sure that we're able to make that schedule work with, you know, the eventual filings of the route permits and the in-service dates for each of these projects.
Because I think, like, from a commission's perspective, and, you know, our staff expressed this in the briefing papers very well, there are safeguards that are put into a contested case that could help us eventually, like whatever decision we make, be a more durable and complete decision, I guess I would say, without saying what will eventually happen. And so I do, like, I can see the value of doing a full contested case. But Ms. Agramonte, before I turn to the department and the other parties, anything you wanted to add on the differences between a contested case and notice and comment?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Ms. Herring that these are two processes that have worked well for the Commission on various dockets. The way I'm seeing this one is we are not going to be filing the route permits until early 27. If we have a contested case for the CN, it's not going to be the short or the long pole in the tent, whichever one is the bad one. And it does provide us with certainty of schedule, which is something that, I'm just always hammering on. The most important thing for any project to be successful is to have a certain schedule. So if we start with an informal process and at some point are forced to convert, that's the biggest risk that I want to avoid, because that's going to really, really throw off the schedule. And so that's why we, the applicants, are supporting a contested case hearing at this time.
And Ms. McAllister, on this issue, please.
Chair, Commissioners, the department also does not object to contested case proceeding. And our initial thought was, at this point in the process, without knowing what the contested issues are, it was difficult to recommend the contested case proceeding at this point, but we are certainly open to and supportive of contested case proceeding.
And Ms. Overland, on the issue of contested case.
Regarding contested case, cost is a huge issue, and I don't see how the cost of this could be addressed in an informal proceeding. A contested case would give us the opportunity to get the information that's necessary. I mean, when you look at the cost increases that have happened in numerous projects, the grid tie line, that went way up. The Northland Reliability Project, that went up 43%. We look at what's happened in the last year, and we see that the economy has been trashed and costs are going up everywhere. And so this really does need to be addressed. I mean, just yesterday, I got notice that a large project in the PJM, a 500 kV line, that doubled in price, and they're having to take another look at that. This is the MARL project. And, we raised this issue in our comments. It's really important because the MISO approval is based on what the cost is at the time. And they're using the MTEP 24 numbers, but those numbers were actually put together in 2023. So you look at costs since 2023 to now, this is crucial, because the MISO approval is based on this cost-benefit analysis, where the cost has to at least be less than the so-called benefits provided. So we need to take a serious look at this, in this and all the projects. And then regarding, putting the projects together, this is just like CapEx, where we had from South Dakota to Wisconsin, all in one, plus the Fargo to St. Cloud. The certificate of need was all together, and I was involved in that. I don't think any of you were here then. Ms. Agramonte was. She can testify how that went. And we had those three different routings. They were, though, combined into one certificate of need, and we did it that way, and that worked. It wasn't confusing. And in this project, we've already had consolidation where we put 25-117, added to that was 18, 19, and 120 all together into this project today. And on the other side, 121, 25121 is also combined with 122. So there's been consolidation on both sides. These are basically the same, 765 projects going through, and they are not different. If you look at the applications, you will see that section 1.4 about the need arguments, they're not different. 1.4 section in the applications are identical. Section 6 dealing with need, that is identical in both the applications. So those should be consolidated. There's no reason why they can't. They can't be decided individually.
Great, thank you, Ms. Overland. And Mr. Crawford or Ms. Wheeler, you two, are you working cooperatively with?
We filed jointly, specifically in relation to the procedural process for this. I will note that we're not opposed to a contested case. We see benefits and drawbacks to each of those approaches. For a contested case, it is time and resource intensive, and for small organizations like ours, sometimes it's difficult to be involved to the extent or the degree that we would like to be. So that's why we recommended the informal process. I think it's both pathways are capable of developing a robust record for the commission to make a reasoned decision, but we are comfortable if it goes to a contested case.
If it goes to contested case, would you be able to participate, or have you talked about that as a joint group, joint filers?
We have not talked about it as a joint group, and for CUB specifically, I think we need to talk internally about that. Obviously, whatever procedural process is decided by the commission will determine, at least to some extent, the scope to which we're able to be involved. For a contested case, oftentimes it requires hiring an outside expert, filing testimony. So I don't know if we'll be able to be involved as a formal intervener. or if our engagement would take a different route, but want to be involved as much as possible.
And Ms. Wheeler, I can't see you if you're still on camera, just because the way my screen looks, but if you have comments, oh, there you are, sorry. Do you have comments on the procedural path here you'd like to add, and whether Clean Grid would be able to be involved in a contested case?
Sure, Stephen, we have no objection to going to contested case, and Clean Grid would plan to be involved in that proceeding if it moves in that pathway.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from commissioners, follow up on that? Okay, then thank you. Commissioner Tuma.
Yeah, Ms. Agramonte, it's good to hear that you're sending eyes on the ground, okay? To say that you're not using computer software to help find a route doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It does exist. I know I've had several people come to me at NARUC and try to sell me on their wonderful products, okay, which cause me concern because I trust eyes on the ground more than I do software. So it's good to hear that. I think my desire is to make sure the record is very clear on what you're doing as far as citing, because this is not the route, okay, but it's, I think Mr. Rocco came up with this term. It's timing, size, and type. So TST, I always try to remember. So type is a big deal, and I think it's going to be a big deal in this route. I think Commissioner Sullivan touched on it. These are different animals than the 345s, and our farmers have and landowners have become used to the 345 and what it can do across the landscape. This is going to look a lot different. So I was, with the questions that I'm asking from a type question in the CN, I'm trying to get a good understanding of why we would go with the lattice structure. I've read your application, everything seems good, but I could see this being a question that if I were from Farm Bureau or corn growers actually intervening and wanting to know about this. Before this was even filed, I had a chance to go talk to the Farm Bureau down in Wanamingo, because there's a lot of things going on in Wanamingo. You know, that's where Huntley Wilmart ends down there, and they have a BESS and a solar facility. And so it was very helpful, by the way, GRE, that two of your member cooperative board members were there, and they were very helpful in explaining some of the things that are going on. But this line came up in that discussion about what's going to look like, and you know, most of it was, I can't talk to you about it, you need to talk to your folks. But I can see this being a significant discussion amongst landowners and farmers about this type that we've selected. So my goal was to get information in the record, because I don't think it is our environmental assessment staff's responsibility to get this information in the record. And so I was talking to them and working with them, trying to figure out what are some of the things that would cause me heartburn. And I just took a quick view, and I do mention in there two sections, it's just so you know, this is not out of the blue. These are your typical routing maps, okay? This is from Mankato to Mississippi, okay? So if you draw it out, there's essentially 4 sections that make up this map. So this is what we look at normally, how things move through the landscape. It's very, very normal. Actually, this is one we rejected in that one, and part of the reason we rejected it was because we might use this route or this line for these routes that were talked about, okay? And so the landscape is a big deal, and that type and how it looks was what I was struggling with. And the first thing I did was I said, you know, I'm just going to go out to Jackson County and going to zoom in on a section and just move 1,100 feet to 1,300 feet across it to see what it looks like. Guess where I just ended up just looking at doing not Google Maps, but I did the beacon maps, because I have a nice measuring tool in there, and it plopped me right into the middle of a wind farm. Okay, and so that raised the question about how do we move through wind farms? How are you move through them? A little discussion about how far they can be and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of questions in my mind about wind rights, landowner rights, our wind rights are not really a property right, but are we going to weigh them heavier than maybe a neighboring farmer who didn't get to have a wind turbine, who maybe wanted a wind turbine, and now he gets stuck with a 765? I can imagine how that would fly at the Farm Bureau meeting, that the neighbor gets this nice income from a wind turbine. I get stuck with the power line, and I don't get paid the value that goes across that line. And so these are the questions I put out. You're probably a little more specific than I wanted. You probably want, but I was just trying to make sure we zoomed in on what concerns there are. A through C is basically asking you, give me how you view moving through a wind farm. What are your limitations? What are your obligations? Tell us how you're going to do that so that the public can be informed. And then D through E is just give me some schematics of what it looks like. Give me where you would put the poles through a particular line. So the 3 lines that you said, I think you were saying in the application, seem to be the logical 3 that are left. I agree with you. The guide wire one's ugly. Okay, I was just up ice fishing and at Lake of the Woods, first time in my life, and we passed under the 500 kV line with big guide wires and a little circular thing. It looked like something from Star Wars, okay. We're not putting that down here. We want to respect the view. And I like the idea that the lattice ones are lower. So what does that look like compared to a 200-foot, 800 span monopole? What does it look like compared to a double monopole or double pole structure? And then what are the farming techniques around it, so that'll help give the record so our staff can see what you're saying to the farming community, how you farm around these things, because I think it should be in the EA. And so when you break this down, it's basically asking you, tell me how you move through a wind farm, give me some schematics. We've seen this it was very helpful, I thought, when we did Big Bend, and we had the nice views, sheds of what the wind turbines would look like from the petroglyphs. So there must be some technology out there that can do this, so I'm assuming it is. And so that's what I'm asking for. You'll note I didn't put any time frame on this one. We have a number of days that you need to get the department's requested information, which is they asked for 45 days. I just want you to get it in the record and work with their staff so that as they develop the EA, we can get that information is available to them. That's what I'm thinking. I can break it down in more detail, but I just picked 3 different segments of this route that are trying to get representation of what it would look like. That's it. This, again, not the route. This is just to start asking the question, is this the right type of facility? We got size and timing. That's another question. So that's what I'm thinking, Commissioner Sullivan, but I don't know if you have any more questions.
So like for D 1 through 8, that's what that's where I was like, whoa, what's going on here? So you're looking for, like, I remember in Big Bend where they put out a picture of, like, this is what it'll look like at 7 miles. This is what it'll look at 9 miles. So that's what you're looking for in here. Like, what would a monopole, what would a bipole, what would all these look like at those distances?
And then also across the landscape, how would you, with a monopole, like I said, we probably could do some more of that hitting the field lines as opposed to maybe the lattice structure. Then the question comes, how do you farm around a lattice structure? What are the best ways to farm around it? So those were the thinking. It wasn't trying to be, there's a lot there, but I wanted to make sure, I wanted to look at 3 distinct areas. The very far west, what I consider middle, Fremont, that area, Mauer. And then obviously it looks very different when you get up to Dodge and Olmsted counties.
So then, and like decision options A, B, and C, like those are, you're trying to kind of put those into the record early so that we have a sense of, like, basically, like, this is what the NERC requirements are.
Or the other standards that are out there that limit my ability to work through a wind farm.
So that the public and everybody is kind of, those are already, there's kind of fixed stars in the conversation from the jump, rather than having to go answer those later. Is that what you're?
Exactly. Because I would hate to get in a situation where they come and say, we can never move through a wind farm. Well, why? And I could see that being a dispute. Like I said, you got the farmer who's on the outside. Why do I got to get stuck with this? when the guy who's making all the money off these wind facilities should have the burden. I can just see that argument, and then we have to go back during the route permitting to fight that. So that's kind of what I'm trying to dig at, yeah.
So
The applicant should have a chance.
that's what I was going to say is like, I sort of was following what was going on there, but Ms. Agramonte and Ms. Herring, can you step through, starting at 11A, I think like what your reaction to each of these is, and I think it's important for us so that we're not confusing the route permits criteria with the CN criteria, to also like hear real specifically about whether each of these will be covered. If they're not going to be covered in the CN, will they be covered in the route, and how? So if you could start at A, please, and however you'd like to divide them up, just walk us through them.
Thank you, Chair Sieben, Commissioners. First, Commissioner Tuma is absolutely right. There are software tools out there. What I was trying to emphasize is that these applicants don't use them. Okay?
Which one is are the tools in?
Tools, I believe, yeah, I will get down to B,
Okay,
but I simply want to
let's
make
just
that.
start at A.
All right, we'll start at
because
A.
I'm not as quick as you all are here.
That's okay. There are no standard setbacks for wind farms or solar farms. These are all going to be very individual analyses of where the wind farm is, whether there can be overhang. I've been involved in one solar farm where panels had to be removed, and that was coordinated between the utility and the solar farm. The analysis is happening. The applicants have been reaching out to existing solar and wind development and other renewable energies, or I guess we have more than renewable out in the Southwest these days, and inquiring about future projects so that we can coordinate, right? So that's going to be a coordination. It's not I have to be 6 feet from you or 20 feet from you. It's all going to be very project specific. And so we're happy to explain that process. And that seems appropriate. I got a little concerned about trying to be really precise in these requests, but happy to add some information about how we are going to route with solar farms and wind farms at a high level, because this is a certificate of need.
So yes, you're okay with A?
I am okay with no. I am okay with how Commissioner Tuma described it as, please tell me how you are going to route around solar farms or wind farms or account for existing and future wind farms.
In this docket?
In this docket.
You just need new language that kind of folds it all together?
Yep, I just want a higher level request so that it's not so specific with the details of what we provide.
Well, if there's no electrical engineering limitations, then just say that. I mean, that's the answer to the question, and then it asks you to explain how you move. That's B, how you're going to move around wind farms. What is your protocol? That's the key to me, is what kind of protocol are you going to use? I mean, if we don't have any and it's case by case, that's extremely helpful, and I think it's helpful to the public and helpful to the farmers who are around that area, because I'd hate to have them have this feeling like, gee, it seems like you avoid all the wind farms and put it on my property. If that's not going to be the case, bingo, that's all you have to say.
Ms. Herring? Or Ms. Agramonte, sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the baton.
We're still on A. We're on A only.
Thank you, Commissioners. Let me just step back a second. I just am generally concerned about a completeness determination expanding into what I see as discovery requests, both from the Department of Commerce and, well, Commissioner Tuma is not a party, but these are the kinds of issues that would be brought up and resolved in a contested case proceeding, again, with predictability and means by which to negotiate the scope and all of that. Setting that aside, we are okay with A. If you want to leave it just as it is, A is fine.
And so what I just took from that is perhaps, Commissioner Tuma, like this language for both pages of your language, it might need to be wordsmithed a little bit for things like applicant shall consider the following questions in the certificate of need application or something. Is that what you're saying, Ms. Agramonte, or what was that general framework you were giving us there?
Apologies, Chair. I'll try to streamline this. we can work within the language that Commissioner Tuma has proposed for A.
Okay.
I've kind of given you the overview of the answer, and we will be happy to provide that in the docket.
So, okay with A in this docket, that's helpful. Ms. Herring, you agree with that too?
Yes, Chair.
And then B.
This really goes into routing, how we are going to route or not route. Those adjustments are going to be made on a parcel by parcel basis. I don't know exactly how we answer this other than happy to put in the docket that we're not using software. If that's helpful, and that we describe in more specificity the manual labor.
And I'm fine with that, Ms. Agramonte. I mean, the second part is the part that I'm most concerned about, and is how do you deal with what is going to be I guess, standard conditions of how you manually look at a wind farm or a solar facility. And so if there are any, I think that is, in my mind, important as it relates to the three different structures that you're doing, and the timing and the places are going to be determined in the route, but the actual things that you're going to be using, like lattice structures that has a broader base versus as a monopole structure, can you put that closer to wind farm? I don't know that, and I think that's something the EA should be addressing, because we were talking again about type. So keep focused on, this is about type. I'm not trying to get into routing. I'm trying to figure out, of these three decisions that we have to make, which is the best type, and how you move around a wind farm. If you can move around it easier with a monopole versus a lattice structure, that's an important consideration. Now, we have lots of other things that we got to consider. Cost, a big one, and other impacts like distance. We don't want to be jumping across a whole bunch of 765s. Just are not going to move like a 345 or smaller. And so that's the conversation I think needs to be, again, with type. I'm not trying to get you narrowed in and say you must go next to this solar farm or this wind farm that I happen to see out in western Minnesota. How do your people look at a wind farm with these three types is what I guess could be a little more specific, but that's what I was trying to get at.
Ms. Agramonte.
Thank you, Chair Stephen. I see where you're going. So what you are interested in knowing is whether we can be closer, or there are any different considerations based on the type of structure.
Exactly.
Excellent. Happy to answer that question.
And I don't think we need to answer it now.
No, I understood.
And I'm following where you're headed here too, Commissioner Tuma, and I'm just trying to think, why don't we keep stepping through by you both or all discussing C? And we kind of did. And then what I'm thinking is we'll need to take a recess after stepping through your decision option to give the applicant or you, Commissioner Tuma, time to work with our staff to revise the language a little more, to be a little more precise of what we're all thinking should be in the CN. And we'll give parties a chance to respond to that after we after we step through and take a break and see where we're at. But Commissioner Tuma, then is it okay if we move to C, which we kind of already did?
Yeah, and I'm actually thinking, as I look at this and talking to Ms. Agramonte, I appreciate, you almost could get rid of B and just say, as it relates to type of facilities or poles, what criteria would apply? And I think that covers
How they would differ in how you would route those in proximity. I'm just like, I'm getting a little hung up on criteria because maybe it just means to be a very broad term, and that's fine. I understand what you're trying to get at, Commissioner Tuma, and so that makes sense to me.
And again, this is, obviously I'm interested in it, but I'm looking at it from the prism of affected landowners and communities that it's crossing through. That's the prism I'm putting on this. I'm not trying to say, gee, John wants to know this. Yeah, I do, but I think it's more important I can see, a county or townships wanting to know this. I could see farmers wanting to know this information. How are we moving through these structures that are already existing there? So,
because that relates to the size and the type of the project.
Yep. And so that's what I'm saying is, if we're going to take this size, now the question is the type, and there's, I think, three three realistic alternatives that they've given to us. Those, in their application, I kind of agree with that. And so that's why I'm trying to focus in on those three realistic options.
Okay, so that's sort of covered in D, but then we have these 8 specific counties or sections called out that you're working with my anxiety here too, Commissioner Tuma, like, looks like citing things, but talk us through why D and 1 through 8 are not citing and they are size, type, and timing issues.
So look at the last sentence on D. It says the purpose is to identify how each of the proposed structures would comparatively mitigate impacts on agriculture and human residents and structures across these residential landscapes.
Wait, the last sentence?
Very last sentence of D.
Oh, of D, after the, yeah.
I think, probably should have started with that as the very first sentence of D, but that is the goal here, is to understand how it moves through the landscape. And these are 3 different, I broke it up into 3 different landscapes, arguably 4 different landscapes, is far west with turbines and solar with turbines, far west without, middle, which is Mauer Freeborn area, which is, I'm going to say then, the next sentence above it talks about we're adding more residents and more structures as you get further east, and then north, going up through Olmsted Dodge, is you're going to have more residents and that. And so I just wanted to encourage the applicant to identify some representative sections and kind of walk through that landscape, show me how the poles would work and where you would place them just moving through there. So that gives us a sense of what that landscape would look like visually, and also from an ag use standpoint, because I think that's going to be where a lot of the discussion is ag use. And then the last one, F, is to tell me how many acres are lost. I don't know. I'm hearing the argument that 800-foot span with the lower monopoles is going to have other problems, and so give me the acres lost versus the longer structure where I can go 1,100 to 1,300 feet, which I maybe could get field lines better, and then it means less loss. That's the part that I would assume there's literature out there talking about how to farm around these things, again, to help inform our staff, so when they're putting the EA together, we have a very complete EA or environmental assessment that's done. And so that's the goal, is to give them good information. I think that falls on the applicant to develop this and not our staff. And so that's why I'm doing it early, so it informs the environmental assessment. That's the goal here, is to make sure they have the best information, and it comes from the applicant is doing the work. So that's the concept of
all of D.
All of D, E, and F, actually, when you put them all together. Because all E does is says, give us the best literature for farming around these structures. And the F says, tell me how much land would be lost in each of the examples that you gave us, so that we can kind of make an assessment of acres lost to farming.
Commissioner Tuma, when I, sorry about that. When I look at D, the 1 through 8s, like, I hear what you're saying, that it's the kind of the type of structure that we pick is going to affect more of a certificate of need, like.
What mitigations could we do? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping.
Question.
Yeah. Questions that may lead to mitigations. And we may also disagree with the type they picked.
So I understand those words, but I'm not sure I understand it, like, intellectually. Like, how is that, like, when you look at, like, having software that would do 1 through 8, how do you do that without having a route? Do you know what I mean?
Again, it would be a hypothetical. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying go give me a piece of your route. Just give me a landscape out there that you feel is representative of a landscape in western Minnesota. There I would see, and this is what I'm seeing in my mind. You have bigger fields that are more than 80-acre fields. You have, you could have 360
so
foot
plains. Yeah.
You get to Freeborn Mauer, you're going to have more 80-acre fields than you are going to have, and you're going to have more barns and more structures in residence there. And then when you get up to Dodge Olmsted, you're gonna have a lot more rivers and streams, you're gonna have, 40-acre fields that are tied into different angles that are not square like you would see out in Jackson County or Pipestone or whatever. And so I'm just kind of trying to get a flavor for how it looks and moves through those landscapes. And that may help us determine what kind of mitigations that are, we should implement in the CN for dealing with, because that's where we do the mitigations. We do have that authority now under permitting, but there's a lot of things we can do. They brought the CN first, and so what are the mitigations that we want to place? We might want to have them go out and, I don't know, work with the best literature and talk to the farm organizations or something we could put in the record, no different than what we did on line 3 when we asked them to go talk to the tribal communities, things like that. That all happened because of the CN authority that we had, not the routing authority. So.
Ms. Agramonte and Ms. Herring.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. One thing I'd like to note is that the staff often requests information from the applicants during the development of their environmental review document. So if these are questions that need to be in the environmental review document, they would issue them to the applicant and we would respond. So one way you could handle these various topics is to have staff send us requests and then we will provide the information.
Wait, sorry, I couldn't hear. Have staff
send the request to the applicant and we would provide this information in the same way that you're looking at an order.
Once it's in contested case, or once if we were doing that way, or I think that's like a little. That's why we're trying to work it out now, right, Commissioner Tuma? So it's like we already know Commissioner Tuma is going to go here, whether we want him to or not. So, let's hear what it is, so that you can appropriately respond to.
And there's an important point there, Madam Chair. I wanted you to see what I'm thinking, so I'm not just going to staff and saying, get this in the record. Mm-hmm. You're seeing what I would have gone and told staff here after this hearing, and they'll get this in the record. I wanted to make sure we had this conversation, understand why it was important, because of the type of structures they're referring to here are going to be a big issue, and I think staff is wanting this information. So I'm not doing this without talking to staff in advance. That we did talk about this in great detail, and I can tell you that they want it, okay? And so that this is just me making sure my fellow commissioners aren't surprised, because this is a big deal, and they're saying, what's John up to now? Okay, I wanted them to hear why I'm thinking this, and we've had those conversations. So we could have done it 2 weeks from now, but you're going to have a conversation about it now, which is helping because it's refining what I'm thinking, and we're hearing what you're thinking about this and what I'm trying to find what us and staff are trying to find.
And because we don't talk to each other ahead of time, sometimes we have to work this out in public.
Well, that's just
and it's just the way the process is. So I appreciate that, Commissioner Tuma. So, Ms. Agramonte.
I did want to address D specifically. I'm struggling a bit with figuring out how to implement this because, as I mentioned, there's a routing process going on, and the last thing we want to do is come up with a hypothetical route segment that isn't under consideration and put it in the record somewhere and perhaps involve people who aren't actually in an area that's being considered. But I understand you're wanting to see kind of a visual simulation of what would these different poles look like in the far west, what would they look like in the east. And I think that can be done on a visual sim basis that wouldn't be geographically tied to any parcel or area, because that's really the hang up. I don't want to make something up that
isn't going to happen.
But I want you to use realistic, I don't just come to me and say, oh, here's, 4 fields at 80 and how we would cross. Be realistic. I mean, you don't have to give the road, you don't have to give the section, but I want realistic examples, that we're using, so we're not just making things up. And then, like I said, when you drill down into these areas, there's some representative type sections, and so you can very clearly say this is not the route. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, we can. But anytime you put a line on a map, that.
I know. Yeah.
So,
And
and
we're finding out that the other section of this route, they're already having that problem.
so the Chair and Commissioner Tuma, that's, you know, with wind turbines, without turbines, I think that if you ask us to just do representative areas along the project, you're going to get that, because that is the area. So the specificity is, again, what I get a little hung up on, because I'm not sure it's exactly what you want, and it's going to make it more like make sure we do this thing and this thing, rather than getting your main goal, which is show me how these different poles would look in different parts of the routing area for this project.
Yeah, and I get that. My concern was I didn't want to sit there and go back and forth and back and forth. I wanted to have this conversation up in front so that you understand. I do want specificity of some clarity of how these specific routes would move through this landscape, and I don't want just some made up stuff in a half done. So I wanted you to know I really do. When I laid out 1 through 8, I really do want to see. I do, and I think our staff would find benefit from it. Not only for this process, it does bleed into the route when we get to the route to say, yes, we have explored, monopoles, because I know that's going to be a question when we get to route. I just know you're going to get a farmer who doesn't want this on their property, and they're going to say, how come you didn't do monopoles? And I want to be able to look at them and say, if we get to this place where we do say, yes, this is appropriate time, type, and timing, all thing is ready to go, we're going to do this, it must be done because MISO has said this is critical. I know when I get to that, laying out that route, there's going to be some farmer along the line saying, please put monopoles on my structure. And we can say, we looked at that, and 250 feet with lights on top of it, probably not going to be a great idea. Okay. And so I want to make sure when we get to that point, we have examined this very carefully, and that is a type question, not a routing question.
Ms. Agramonte, your hearing.
Yeah, you used the word representative route, and that's where I was getting a little bit hung up on, because I was viewing this as just kind of showing what those structures would look like in proximity to the existing features, rather than necessarily any kind of length of route, because that I won't know. And it will be, are we going to go straight, or are we going to go diagonal? What's going to really depend on what at that corner is in the environment. So
right. But look, my hope is that we'll have a good understanding at this time, generally what it's going to look like, and be able to address that with these lattice structures, if that's where we go, is to be able to know what our limitations are, why we're limiting ourselves to that, and so we're not making assumptions going into that routing discussion with landowners as we move through the landscape. That's, I get it. I understand that you don't want to identify a particular route at this stage. I'm very concerned about that too, but it's helpful to know how it works diagonally versus, straight across. It's just there are different animals, and they can do different things through that landscape, and so that's what it's helpful to know and make that decision on the type.
Commissioner Tuma, do you think that are we getting to a point where when the CN comes up at the end, if we send it to contested case and the judge develops this question around the proof of concept examples for specific areas, is there going to be a question before the commission of what type of pole we put in what segment of the overall CN?
I hope not.
I hope not too, and I'm a little worried that that's what we're driving towards here. Like that we're going to get to a point where then we're arguing over, like, there should be a monopole in this county, and over here there should be a H pole, and no offense, but I can see that happening with
But again,
your level of expertise that you bring to our process. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm really trying to understand by drilling down this much and saying it might be better just to say give us a visualization of what H structures would look like in all segments, for example, and then give us an example of what the, or the H-frame versus a tubular steel monopole versus a proposed lattice structure. Because what I don't want to have happen is that when we're back deciding whether or not to grant a CN, we're juggling with like, you need this type of structure in this segment through the driftless area, and you need this type of structure in this area, because that sounds like a big headache for me to be like, that is not necessarily what we do as a commission on a CN application. And so how do you think, am I thinking of it correctly, or what am I thinking wrong? Because I'm with you where it's like, give us the visualization like we did for Big Bend, because that really did help the public and parties see like, this is how I could see it on the landscape, and this is from different ways away. But I'm struggling here with like, this particular type of structure should be in this particular segment of the CN.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
I'm asking specifically, give me the breakdown so that I understand acres lost, agricultural practices, so that our staff has an effective and meaningful environmental assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So that, again, this is not something I want them to be putting together. I want them to get this information to us as early as possible, so it informs our decision. And once a decision's made, that's the decision, and we can defend it because we have good information in the record. Okay, I'm not visual. This, there could be times we've discussed about this. We actually gave the Lower Sioux tribe a choice between two different structures across the Minnesota River because of very specific natural limitations and a cemetery that they are past burial site that they would be going by, whether they wanted a lower structure just for that 1 mile. Okay, so that I don't want to limit our ability to maybe have that conversation on a particular spot in a particular location because a county or a local entity wants a lower structure. That's not the goal, though, is to start picking the structure up front.
But
we
I
need to
think
know the
that
information.
we do want to pick that, though, in the routing selection.
Exactly.
And that's why I'm struggling here, why this should be broken down by 1 through 8.
Again, what we're deciding here for this CN decision is not that. That's a separate routing decision. It'd be nice to be informed on what we know. What the decision we're making here is a type decision. They're saying lattice structure. And that's what I would envision from beginning to end, lattice structure. What is the impact of that? With just a representation of what that would look like in a particular landscape as they change over the distance of this route. If it was all the same, I wouldn't ask for that. But when you drive, it looks different in Mower County than it does in Dodge County. It just does. And so I just want them to be able to explain that, why they're doing it this way, and be able to see that, and then we make a decision. Yes, lattice structure is the best, or monopoles are the best. We don't know that until they ask. I think these questions are asked. That's just all I'm trying to get that information to our staff to put in the EIS, so then we can make that decision. They proposed lattice structures, I think, for good reasons. Now they just have to prove it. That's their obligation to prove up. And I picked the two other structures they say are the most likely in this area, which I agree with them. They're probably the two most likely alternatives. Give us that information. So we are narrowing it down here, but we're now asking them to prove it up and give us staff the information so they have an informed environmental review for the public to see. And that's why we're doing it early as opposed
In the
to
CN.
later.
In the CN.
Right.
And I'll get to you, Commissioner Sullivan, but Ms. Agramonte and Ms. Herring, can you respond to that exchange and like
Yeah.
if my thinking is valid or not?
Yeah, Chair, Commissioner Tuma, I am really struggling with this particular detail because as you were explaining the need for it, you were talking about, well, let's see what the comparative impacts are of a lattice versus a monopole and what the acres of impacts are. I won't know that until we develop the routes. I started the conversation with saying if you want a visual simulation of how these structures would look in those different environments, we can absolutely do that. But when you start asking for route segments and what would be the impacts, And I'll also note that we've been talking here about how, well, maybe we can't move with a 765. You can move a lot. It's just going to cost a lot more than moving a 345. Like when we have any angle at all, we're into very expensive structures. And so that's the limitation on those lattices. It's not that we absolutely can't, but that it comes at a greater cost than it has for lower voltages.
And Ms. Herring.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. I think, what I'm hearing, the applicants understand the information that Commissioner Tuma is trying to gather in the record. And I think, we can develop that information. I think we can take it up to a higher level, understand the information that you're looking at, and perhaps it's combining, subparts D through F into, just describing our analysis of these three different structure types, providing visual simulations just generally of these different structure types, and a further discussion of the key elements that went into our selection of the structure type. Obviously, we looked at, four poles in the ground versus one pole and guide. All of those elements went into our proposed structure type, and I think we can further develop that information in the record, but not probably to this level of detail that we're getting in these decision options.
That's the part that I'm confused about. I'm not asking for a significant level of detail other than just 4 different landscape types and how it would look through that type. And they are existing in this landscape. I mean, it's not, I'm not asking for you to go and tell me what it looks like in Montana. I'm telling you these are definitely 3 different areas that are different. We know that. And it would help to understand what is the ag impact on that. That's what I'm trying to get at, so that when we get to the question of, I'm going to lose more acres, we can say, no, you would actually not lose more acres. You would actually lose more acres with an 800-foot span and the monopole. I know that's a farmer's going to come and ask that question. And it'd be nice to have developed record to say, yes, we addressed that when we picked the type. Because of this. And oh, by the way, here's the literature on farming around these structures that make it less impactful. That's what our staff would like to see in a CN, to be able to develop it, to say, yes, we've looked at that.
Ms. Agramonte, and then Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, we can do that on an easement basis. We can say, if we were a lattice structure, here's where we'd be placed generally in the field. Or if it's a monopole, here's where it would be generally. I don't know today how far away we'd be from that wind farm that's located in that area. Might be right next to it, might be a mile away. So the idea that we can come up with a representative way that this line would flow through an area with wind farms is, I don't have a typical. And the questions you're asking, which I absolutely understand, is how am I going to farm around these poles? Are they going to create any limitations for my farming? And does that depend on my structure type? Give me that information in the application. And that we can do.
That's good. Okay, Commissioner Sullivan.
I-90 is 278 miles long across southern Minnesota. Please use as much of that 278 miles as you possibly can, so that we can avoid this. I mean, that's what I'm thinking about, is that, but I think I feel like we've kind of, I heard Ms. Agramonte say we can do something that's representative. That felt good enough to me. I'm worried about, this feels just so granular, it feels so like we could create problems rather than solve them.
What I'm worried about, Commissioner Sullivan, is this. Okay? They give me some sloppy one piece of property that is 360 acre fields and says, here's what it looks like. It doesn't represent anything that I would see. It would look more like Montana than it does Dodge County. That doesn't tell me anything. Okay? Mm-hmm. Actually having them look at Mower County and Freeborn County and say, what is representative of this area that has a freeway through it? Just put it in there and run it through there and show me what it would look like. And then simply tell me, with the monopoles, you lose this many acres, with the, four-legged lattice structure, you lose this many acres. That's all I'm asking. I don't think this is that complicated. I'm asking specifically, just say, pick a western area with lots of big fields, middle area with less than big fields, Dodge County with lots of
So
big
like,
fields.
here's, what are there, 11 counties in southern Minnesota, 11 counties on the border, let this run through, like, here is Mauer County, here is,
Just give me something somewhat representative.
Rock, here's Noble.
I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to say every township, I'd go through and tell me, I don't want that. I just want to see, and I think it's beneficial to future decisions so that we don't get back there and they give us something that's half representative of what should be, and then I'm turning around asking for information requests with you already even knowing about it, because then I got staff in the middle and you guys ask, well, what am I asking this for? So that's why I wanted to have it up front. Everybody knows I'm not asking for, the end of the world here. I'm just asking for representative
Not yet.
walkthrough.
Later it will come,
could.
Commissioner Sullivan. No, I think this is helpful discussion because it gives the parties and the applicants, more importantly, like an idea of what we would be looking for. And in my mind, like it's driving me like we're still probably headed towards a contested case. And then this generally can be something that the judge helps develop the questions around. So if that's okay, like with you both, I suggest we take a break. Commissioner Tuma, you work with our staff and the applicants come up with like what they heard, and then after however long that takes, we can come back and see what you've come up with, see what the applicants have come up with for this decision option 11A, like a mashed up version of it, and then we'll hear from parties what they think about the two different options. Does that sound good? How much time do you think we need to do that? I'm not going to be involved in it, so I'm more interested about eating my scone that Commissioner Sullivan brought me from Kara.
I'm not wanting to go past lunch too long, so.
A half hour?
Yeah,
Is that,
yeah.
like, if we come back at noon, is that enough time for folks?
It is on our end.
Okay, the commission stands in recess until noon.
Welcome to WebEx. Press 1 to be connected to your meeting. This webinar is being recorded and summarized.
Testing. Star Wars.
Monster truck rally. You always need to spice these things up, right?
Sure.
Why don't we take recess?
Test.
Welcome to WebEx. Press 1 to be connected. This webinar is being recorded and summarized.
Test. Testing.
Do we like shut the system down and well, that's what I think I should hang up and see.
Yeah,
And
let's
try
try
and
that.
join.
We disconnected from here once. Now we're doing it there. All right. Oh, yeah. Okay. And see if we can get a dial tone. Go ahead. I think you hit answer.
No, dial phone.
Okay. Then. Okay. All right.
Welcome to WebEx. Press 1 to be connected to your meeting.
Press 1. Yep.
I hear it.
This webinar is being recorded and summarized.
Gotta unmute.
Testing.
So, what if we like shut down the system and bring it back up?
Let's see here.
Or just restart the AV
Is the
menu?
large hearing room joined twice?
No. That's the first thing I checked.
Yeah. Let me try computer audio real quick. That'll be faster, I think, and might be better. Noise removal. Speakerphone. Okay, now. And where did I put my? Is that my computer?
So what do you want to do now?
Oh, see.
Well, we're connected via the room audio now, so we should be able to just test it.
Yeah, let me see.
Testing.
Well, that's, I mean, you gotta make sure people can hear it.
JD. Testing. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Jelly beans.
One more testing.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Yes. Good.
I think so. And here, mute that. Testing. Right. Yep. Right.
Yes.
All right. So I switched.
Didn't sound like it was muted.
The commission will come back from its recess. Thanks for your patience, everyone, while we worked through a technology issue. So, Commissioner Tuma, we have, I assume you have a amended decision option or new language or perhaps an idea. So we'll hear from you and then see what the applicants came up with since I asked them to work on something. And then hear from the parties about both sets of things we're hearing, if that works.
That sounds like good. Let's start with where I think we have agreement. So on A, B, and C, we can put that up, JD. I eliminated B as we talked about, created a new C that basically is related to the type of structures described in C below, which is the old D. What general criteria would apply when running generic 765 transmission line through or next to existing wind farms and solar farms.
So the idea, Commissioner Tuma, is that three different, the monopole, the tubular, the lattice, or the other one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
two-pole.
Two-pole, okay.
So
And
B.
And that's
so A's
like,
the same, B's gotten rid of, and we basically incorporate that into the new B. So
and then what about D?
we'll get to that next. Let's just stay. I thought we had agreement on these three, so I'm trying to get to agreement first.
Ms. Agramonte?
Chair Stephen, Commissioner Tuma, yes, those changes are acceptable.
And do we want to hear from the other parties too? Now, or just?
Why don't we wait till we're done?
Okay, sounds good.
Go from there. And then D, Madam Chair, is obviously the new C since I got rid of B. And I changed it just to make it simpler, just say that each of the three areas identified, again, below, using the three different poles. Then I said at the end here, each of the following, the western portion of the identified area, they have an identified area in their CN, central portion of the identified area in their CN, and the portion near Rochester in their CN, which is an area that they have identified in their CN. And include an explanation why you selected a proof of concept is representative. So I'm not telling them how many to do, how few to do. I'm just telling, give me three representative areas to do, okay, so that we can get a proof of concept how the polls work through those areas. I would think it might be wise for them to maybe do a proof of concept along I don't know, I-90. That might be helpful to a commissioner. It might be helpful to work through a wind farm, but just give us some proof of concepts that are fair representation. If you do the minimum, our staff will look at you and go, we want more, okay? So like I said, I'm trying to work with staff to make sure we get good information in the record. That was my goal, and if it's not good enough, they'll ask for more. And we'll talk about timing when we're done here as far as when they want the information.
And before we move off of that, just because this is the first time I'm seeing it too, in this new C, we will get at least 9 examples then, because.
No, you'll get a minimum of 3, but I hope they do more.
But it says, are you still keeping in where it says applicants will use for each particular structure?
Yeah, each three different structures through whatever landscape they pick.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
That's 9.
Yes, a minimum 9.
Got it. Okay. And is this your new C is instead of
D.
all a D?
Correct. So none of the more specific that was causing people heartburn. I just used their areas they've identified in their CN. And then we, on the next 2, which is related to this, which would be the new new E, we want technical literature on the best ways to farm around this so that it's helping our staff in putting together the environmental assessment. And then some kind of description of how much acres lost. I did see their suggestion about mileage. I don't care. I was just looking at it tied to the example we used so I could use it either way. Either one's fine by me, but that's what we came up with is, provide us with, some identified how many acres are lost in that area using best management practices, farming agricultural practices around these structures.
So is D, Commissioner Tuma, going to be the number of acres for each of the 9 scenarios?
Correct.
Okay, and then I can't, sorry, JD, can you move up or did you not talk, no, down, I meant. We didn't see this language yet, so unless.
That's the applicant language.
Oh, okay. So then yours would end at that new D.
That's correct. Like I said, I don't know if I necessarily disagree with the applicant providing agricultural impacts per mile basis. I guess either way is fine by me. I just want them to explain the impacts between the 3 structures so that we can have it in the record. And that's frankly what staff wants because they got to put an EA together. And then finally, just on timing, I left it open to you discussing with staff, but just so you know, 45 to 60 days is what they're thinking because they want at least as much of this information to inform the EA. And that's a discussion. I don't know about the details or the schematics. That's a conversations I don't need to have from here. That's what you have with them. And if they don't feel they're getting good enough information, they can always ask for more information. And each commissioner can ask for information. So if you didn't feel like you got enough information, you could ask for one along the road.
You're saying, Commissioner Tuma, all your new decision option 11A as outlined, you'd like all of this filed in the
record.
In the record, does it get filed before it goes to contested case?
Yes.
That's your intent. Okay.
The hope is to help staff as they put together the environmental assessment, which is before testimony and all that stuff is put together out there. We want the people who are providing testimony or concerned about it having this information in hand so they have knowledge of what the impacts are.
Okay. Commissioner Sullivan, did you want to walk through, or did you have questions on Commissioner Tuma's changes?
I don't have questions on his changes, but I was going to ask him if he would be willing to entertain a friendly modification or addition.
Always.
A friendly addition, and I was looking at the break, I was looking at the map again to reacquaint myself with it, and it is, when you look at the dots on the map where the substations are, I-90 is like right in there, and I know you guys know this, but we have a new state statute, the 161, it's not new, it's an addition, it's the Next Generation Highway Statute 161.45, Next Generation Highway Act. And I was I was thinking a decision option, since this is definitely siting and routing adjacent, what we're doing here. I don't know if I understand what you're saying.
It's informing.
Informative, adjacent, yeah. I was thinking we would do something along the line so that it's clear and that the public knows not only is there the preference of the state statutes, but that the order would reflect something along the lines of, and I had staff draft up some language that would read, as the applicants move forward with the routing permit and as encouraged by Minnesota Statutes 161.45, the Next Generation Highway Act, this transmission line must be located within the highway right-of-way to the greatest extent possible.
Yeah, and I would put that as a separate bullet, like now I have D, so it'll be the new F. But like I said, I think it would be incumbent upon a rational, thoughtful applicant to help us with not only, I was looking at agriculture, but I think you got a good point. How would an H structure go through a roundabout or a cloverleaf intersection by a city that happens to be? That's always the downside of following the freeway. You're going to hit a city at some point. Which structure works better? Monopole, I would assume would be better, but I don't know. And so that's what I'm trying to get at is I think someone would be wise to run one by the city of Jackson, see what would happen. Now, I don't want to do that because they're worried all of a sudden the city of Jackson is going to go ballistic because who said it's going to be there? So that's the struggle. I get the struggle they have, and so I like the way you've done it is that we have this statute we're going to be guided by, and you would be wise to help us see how these structures move through there because that is a type question. It could very well be. I'm just making the assumption that a monopole would work better next to a freeway, but maybe I'm wrong. That's what I'm trying to get at in this discussion. So I would be happy to put it in there as a new bullet.
I'd be happy to hear from the parties.
Do we have the language? No. Can you?
I think
well, maybe we just.
Ms. Gretz is putting it together.
Okay, we'll get it. But
I'd
your idea is just to add it into another.
The last bullet.
Just so it's super clear.
Okay, and then we still want to hear about what the applicant came up with for D to F, but Ms. Agramonte, why don't you start?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
At the top.
Commissioners, I'll start with Commissioner Tuma. I appreciate the adjustments to D. I think the only thing I quibble with is you talk about these 640 acres and then you talk about routes. I just want to make sure we understand that you're talking about a representative placement of the line across 640 acres, not something greater than that. Right? Okay.
It's helpful. Like I said, we look at these every day, at least I do. These maps, that's what I was trying to say. Give me a map like this with pole placement.
Thank you. The second modification is we would ask that you include the per mile because we think that would be the most apples to apples comparison that we can provide for those different pole placements.
What are you talking about?
In F? I think it's F or maybe it's a new E. It's D, I'm sorry. If it could just be the number of agricultural acres per mile, as I believe Commissioner Tuma was okay with.
And I'm okay with that. I would probably add to there also a description of how you arrived at.
Absolutely. Our methodology would be part of that discussion.
As long as we understand that, because that again feeds into helping our staff put the environmental assessment together.
Thank you, Commissioner Tuma.
Before we move off of that, so Mr. Davis, can you add in that language per mile and a description of the methodology used to determine it?
And that would supersede what applicants had provided as an alternative. We're okay with the language that Commissioner Tuma has put together here. I will say with respect to timing, visual simulations are time consuming. And so we would like to work with staff on what would be an appropriate timing for that. And I think that was what Commissioner Tuma was indicating would be appropriate. With respect to the Next Gen Act, I am concerned about putting a routing order point in a certificate of need, particularly when we have statutory guidance that tells us that we have to do what we have to do. We have a routing criterion 216E, let me get my numbers, subdivision 11 that says we have to evaluate routes along transmission and highway corridors, and if you make a decision not to put it there, that you have to say why. So it would be our position that we already have sufficient guidance that is by telling us to go do that evaluation, to work with MnDOT, and to provide you our analysis in a robust manner. So I would not support a particular order point in the certificate of need.
And Ms. Agravanti, but on the other changes that Commissioner Tuma outlined in for A, I can't remember what else changed. Did B change? No.
B's gone.
B's gone.
That's what's causing complications. So B is gone, so it'd be A through D, I believe.
You're okay with the entirety of that and are supportive of that instead of your new revised D through F?
Chair Steven, Commissioners, yes.
Okay. And Ms. Herring, you are okay with that as well?
Yes, Chair Steven.
And Mr. Crawford, I'll start with you. Did you follow that, and are you okay with the proposed changes?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, yes, we are. I will note that in the new D, it's saying examples in D, proof of concept examples. I think the lettering on that needs to change to reflect the modified decision option. But other than that, we are comfortable with it.
So next time we have an order writer opening, send an application.
And Ms. Overland?
Essentially okay, although it would be really good at this point when you're talking about types to insert DC underground, because the costs have changed significantly and they are being permitted elsewhere. I mean, we will be bringing it up for sure, but as you're discussing types, please keep that in mind.
Yeah, I thought about that, Ms. Overland, but I think I understand what it'll look like, and I know it's going to be underground and the cost. Those will be the big things for that. So that is legitimate, should be brought up. They're doing it in Germany, but I think that it is going to be addressed, is my understanding from the applicant. Is that correct? Yeah. So.
And the department?
The department is fine with these changes.
Okay. So where are we at, Commissioners? Are we ready with
I'm ready with the motion.
Commissioner Sullivan, did you want to address what the applicant said about your
I mean, I just look at it. Sure. Thank you, Chair Steven. I mean, I hear what Ms. Agramonti said and what the applicant's saying. I mean, I understand the point you make, but like I said when I brought it up initially, like, this is a little bit different. We're spreading out certificate of need from siting and routing. There's going to be confusion out there within the community, about what's going on. This conversation today, I mean, I viewed this as kind of adjacent to, siting and routing, and I just want it to be clear that, when we're having these conversations and that the materials that you guys are working on, that it's very clear that, I recognize, it's a state statute. You've got to be thinking about it already. But I also think there's a point in having a belt and suspenders and reminding people of things and keeping them coming back to, this is something that's really important. So that's why I offered it.
Is this a compromise? And I don't know if you were saying you still want it offered or not, so maybe this isn't helpful, but do you want it to say like, as the applicants move forward with the routing permit and as encouraged by the statute, the Next Gen Highway Act, the transmission line must be considered to be located within the highway right-of-way to the greatest extent possible? Because I think your point is like, they should always look to the statute, and that's what it says. The statute says you should try to put it there as much as you can. But I think what I heard the applicant say is, if you say it must be in the highway right-of-way, then they have to justify wherever it's not. And I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Well,
If
actually,
you support that or the applicant does.
Good
But
point, actually, in some ways, Commissioner Sullivan and Chair Sieben, is to say, as part of the CN discussion, have a thorough section on that. Because we're at the CN level, and I expect them to do it in the permit too, but I think what you're saying is, the sooner we start having this conversation, the sooner this information is made available, the better. And so maybe something along the lines as,
a discussion of
a thorough discussion of
the statute.
how the statute and is going to apply to a 765 line or whatever. That's kind of, I think, what you're getting at, because I agree with you. It's something we need to be assessing early. That's why I was trying to get to this stuff early, because I knew a particular type was going to be a definite issue on the landscape. And so, but your point is, so is going to be putting it near a roadway. So I don't know if there's a way we could
Wonder if you
massage it to make sure that the CN is addressing it up front early.
A description, Ms. Agramonte, of how you've considered it throughout the entirety of the project. Does that help?
Yeah, Chair Sieben, Commissioners, the concern I have is creating a new standard of possibility. And so that was part of what caught my attention. And if I think at the certificate of need stage, which would be appropriate, is for the applicants to outline in detail their plan to comply with 160, 145 and coordinate with MnDOT, and to consider paralleling highway rights of way as required by 216E. Sorry, I-05, my subdivision that I lost. Right, so that you have assurances that we have a plan to do that analysis, and you've now told the world that you're watching. I think that was the objective of
I think
the
that's
order.
better than just opposing what you said earlier to this language. So can you repeat what you just said?
Repeat after me. The applicants shall provide a detailed description of how they propose to analyze paralleling highway rights of way in accordance with, I'm sorry, not even accordance with, paralleling, I guess, in accordance with MnSTAT section 216I.05 subdivision. Whoops, now my computer decided it was going to go away. And again. Subdivision
Sections
11.
4, 5, and 6 is in
You got me already?
164.
Number E. So 15, no, it's E, right? So 216 I-05 subdivision 11E, which is when applicable, the commission must make specific findings considering a route not along an existing high voltage transmission line or highway. And then period, the applicants will also describe their coordination with MnDOT in accordance with, then it's the next gen highways citation.
Do you want to break to think about that or talk to staff?
I can talk to,
If you want to break, just let me know. Otherwise,
I'll just take a look at them.
or if staff wants a break too, we can do that.
Why don't we just take 2 minutes?
Okay, the commission stands in recess until 12:45.
Truck rally song.
The commission will come back from its recess, and Commissioner Sullivan, do you want the language back up on the screen?
Sure, we can put the language back up and just, looks good.
Good deal. So what I would propose now is we hear a complete motion from Commissioner Tuma, and then we pause to make sure everybody understands it and see if there are any people that haven't commented on or were not clear where they are on the overall motion that you're going to make.
Chair Steven, if I could call an audible.
Sure.
There's one item that we haven't yet addressed, which was the original decision option 11, which are the DER items that they want to explore in the docket and requests that they identified as not being completeness items, but issues that they wanted to explore. Applicants would propose treating those as information requests or data requests. Now that we have a formal contested case proceeding, that would be the best way to handle them in my mind, and I believe the Department of Commerce is open to that.
So, Ms. Agramonte, just so that's helpful, and I wasn't really tracking, because Commissioner Tuma's, the new stuff we all just worked through, that's all 11, too, decision option 11, and so what you're saying is you want what we've discussed with, collectively, with Commissioner Tuma and Commissioner Sullivan to be that would all be a new filing that would come within 45 days after issuance of the commission's order, and no, okay, start over, because I wasn't tracking now.
Sorry, Chair Steven, as I understand, Commissioner Tuma has agreed that that information will be put into the docket and that we'll coordinate with the staff on the specific timing. And
But
that they
when
need it
does
for
that
their
all, I'm not tracking, because we don't talk to each other. So does the information that's filed, and maybe staff told me this, we're not getting it through the contested case after it's already referred to the judge? It's going to be filed, all this additional information in the docket?
Chair Steven, Commissioners, Commissioner Tuma's 11A will all be filed in the docket in a timeline in accordance with our coordination with staff. Item 11, which is the DOC-DER lists of information that was commented on in their comments on completeness, we haven't addressed in our discussion today, and I am suggesting that those be deferred for the contested case, and we'll treat them as information requests, and I believe the department is okay with that.
And then the language would stay as is on 11?
It just would not be adopted.
Oh, I see. Okay, and Ms. McAllister, are you okay with that?
Chair Steven, Commissioners, in this case, the department agrees to these, but would like to note that the information in large part that has been requested is related to the GETS report. Some of that information is not in the GETS report, so it cannot be adopted here.
Well, it can be adopted, but you would propose different language instead?
We are agreeing that we could do this through ARs, but would like to note that we think that these applications going forward will be stronger if these items are addressed in the application, in the CN application.
Okay, we're going to take another recess because I'd like to consult with staff. So we'll stand in recess for 5 minutes. the commission will come back from its recess. So Commissioner Tuma, do you want to make a motion?
Ready, Madam Chair. So I would move decision option 1. Get my list here so I can do it accurately. 1, 6, 10, not the original 11, with the understanding that there's an information request going to go out. And then 11A as modified, with the addition of the modified Sullivan 11D or F, I can't remember which one, where we were at, or E. Looks like JD understands what that means. And then 14, and point out that I'm not addressing intervention. I think that's something that should be left to the ALJ if we're going to do a contested case.
Okay, well, first let's hear from, does anybody not understand the motion in front of us or have any like things that they think were an error on it? No? Then Commissioner Sullivan, I don't have any comments. Do you have any on the overall motion before we vote?
No comments.
Great. All in favor of Commissioner Tuma's amended motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion prevails. Thank you very much, everyone. The agenda meeting is adjourned for the day.